Hello, and welcome back to Civic Concord, a podcast where we share information, highlight important topics, and hear directly from people involved in town government. This is a Minuteman Media Network production. Today's conversation is part of our 2026 annual town meeting series, and we're going to be talking about Articles 10 and 11, the FY27 town budget, and the capital plan. To help us explain how the budget actually works, I'm joined by Town Manager Kerry Lafleur and our Chief Financial Officer, Jennifer Barrett. Welcome.
Thanks, Megan. It's great to be here. The budget can definitely feel complicated from the outside, so it's nice to have a chance to talk through how it actually works and what goes into building it each year.
Thanks for having us. A lot of people see the final numbers at town meeting, but there's quite a bit that happens behind the scenes before we ever get to that point.
Okay, so when people hear the town budget, what are we actually talking about? What does the operating budget cover and what doesn't it cover?
So when we talk about the town budget, we're really talking about the funding needed to run the services residents rely on every day. That includes things like police, fire, and ambulance services, public works, library, senior services, inspections, planning, and finance. So basically all of the functions that keep the town operating day to day. The budget that goes to town meeting each spring funds those services for the fiscal year that runs July 1 through June 30. It's also important to understand what it doesn't include. Some services like recreation programs and water, sewer, and electric utilities are funded through fees or rates rather than property taxes. So the operating budget focuses on the core services supported by the tax levy.
So who are the key players involved in building the town budget?
The process really starts in the finance office, where we prepare the framework for the upcoming fiscal year. Department heads then develop their requests based on current services, contracts, and operational needs. The Finance Committee establishes a guideline for how much the overall budget should grow, and from there the finance team works with the town manager and departments to refine those requests so that the proposal aligns with the guideline as closely as possible.
I think it would be good to talk a little bit about the timeline, because I think some colleagues that maybe worked in cities before, or people just kind of thinking about their company's budgets, are on a totally different timeline, and we're talking pretty far in advance, and it might be helpful to talk about when we start, when things kind of get solidified, and when things get approved.
So the process for a municipal budget actually starts earlier than many people realize, as you say. We begin planning for the next fiscal year in the fall, usually around September, which is right around the corner from now. Departments review their needs. The Finance Committee establishes the guideline later in the fall, and then we spend the winter refining the numbers before finalizing the proposal in February so it can appear in the town meeting warrant, which you see in April.
So if I might, and I know Jennifer just said it, but I think it's really important to reiterate that one thing that often surprises people is just how early the process begins. As she said, by the time residents see the budget at town meeting, we've already spent about 6 months working through department requests and refining our proposal.
And we're also really trying to project far in advance. And I think, as departments are developing their budget requests, they have to kind of look into the future and estimate what the increases will be. Can you talk a little bit about how departments develop their budget requests?
Sure. Departments begin by looking at the services they're responsible for delivering and what it takes to maintain those services. That includes staffing, contractual obligations, equipment needs, and ongoing programs. They also look at trends, what demand has looked like, and whether anything is changing. From there, they prepare requests reflecting both current operations and any adjustments they believe are needed going forward. But that's really the starting point. Once those requests come in, we spend a lot of time reviewing them and looking at how everything fits within the town's overall financial framework.
So from the department head side, they do their due diligence, submit their request. What happens after that?
So we take those requests and we compare them against the town's financial capacity, revenue estimates, and then ultimately the Finance Committee guideline. We review past spending patterns, talk with department heads about proposed changes, And we look carefully at whether requests reflect operational needs or enhancements to current services.
And so, I think the challenges comes in when, things have to be adjusted and kind of making difficult decisions across departments. What criteria are used to prioritize requests across the different budgets that come in?
So the first priority is maintaining the services residents already rely on. Beyond that, we also look at sustainability, how a decision affects not just this year's budget, but future budgets as well. Sometimes that means identifying creative solutions, whether that's adjusting how work is organized or identifying more efficient ways to deliver services. The goal is always the same, maintaining strong services while managing costs responsibly.
I'm glad you mentioned sustainability because we are pretty much turning all of these podcasts into sustainability podcasts. And I say often that we really look at all decisions here in Concord to see how they can be done sustainably. And we look at the people, the planet, and the budget and trying to balance those three pillars when making decisions. So speaking of these decisions, where do the hardest decisions usually happen?
So it's probably no surprise the hardest conversations are always the ones that involve staffing. Municipal services are delivered by people, our police officers, firefighters, public works crew, librarians, inspectors, and many others. So when budgets are constrained, staffing levels naturally become part of the discussion. At the same time, many positions are governed by contracts or tied directly to service levels. So those decisions require careful consideration of both the financial and service impacts.
And we've mentioned the Finance Committee guidelines a few times so far. It might be helpful. I don't know if this is a kind of step in the budget process that all communities share. So if I could ask you a little bit about what are the Finance Committee guidelines and what does it mean to meet the Finance Committee guidelines? What kind of trade-offs does that require?
Each year, the Finance Committee looks at revenue projections, inflation, and long-term obligations independently of the Finance Office, and then they establish a guideline for how much the overall budget should grow according to them. We look at CPI across the state and where things should be kept into check. The guideline helps keep the entire process disciplined.
So the guideline really becomes the framework for the rest of the process. And, I would agree with you, Megan. My experience is that communities handle setting a budget guideline in a different manner. Most recently, before coming to Concord, I was in a position where, as the town manager, I actually set the guideline both for the town and the school. But again, here, that responsibility lies with the Finance Committee. And so for fiscal 27, the Finance Committee set a guideline of 2.5%, which we felt was really low. We're in an inflationary environment of 3.2%. So this was intentionally setting a budget less than inflation. As you might imagine, or you can remember because you participated in this, the first round of departmental requests came in well above that. From that point forward, we spent a lot of time reviewing requests and making adjustments. Through that process, we were able to bring the town's operating budget into alignment with the guideline, so again, at 2.5%. And when you look at all cost centers, so when you factor in CPS, CCRSD, and all of the other components to the budget, it results in a budget that has an estimated increase to property taxes of only 1.96%. And that's because of all of the non-property tax revenue that's offsetting that 2.5% increase.
So I think it's fair to say it's a good news story. It's in line with what we were tasked to do this year. So sounds good. And why do we pay so much attention to reserves?
So reserves help maintain the, let me start again. Reserves helps the town maintain and manage unexpected events and also strengthens our financial position when borrowing for capital projects. Strong financial policies help ensure we receive favorable borrowing terms and interest rates. they really help offset the budget in different ways that are maybe not necessarily budget reductions.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm curious to hear what stands out about the FY27 budget this year.
We're going to go with the term refined.
I like that.
We looked carefully at departmental priorities, townwide priorities, and we wanted to be able to ensure resources are focused on the services residents see and use every day.
And so we talked a little bit about inflation. What were there other large cost drivers this year that you can discuss?
The last several years, health insurance has been the biggest cost driver for municipalities, hands down. Fortunately, our FY27 renewal came in lower than we had originally projected, which helped to moderate the increase overall.
And I think we can all recognize that the cost of health insurance is something that municipalities across the country are dealing with. It's certainly not unique to Concord. And in fact, earlier today, Jennifer and I participated in our annual ratings call with Moody's rating agency, and we heard from the analyst that he's seeing, I think he mentioned New Jersey in particular, he's seeing communities in New Jersey dealing with a 1-year increase of 30%.
Whoa, that's significant.
Yeah.
And to benchmark, ours was less than 10.
Okay. And, we talked a little bit about how staffing can be challenging when we're looking at the budget. Should residents think about, are there any staffing changes of note for FY27 that folks should be prepared for?
Yeah, so we'd like to make sure that residents understand that in the fiscal 27 budget, there is no net increase in overall staffing, but there is one notable shift. So in 27, we are moving an open, unfilled position from the town manager's office to public safety, and this is to support the financial and administrative needs of the police and fire departments. That helps those departments manage grants, reporting, and operational coordination while allowing sworn personnel to focus on their primary responsibilities.
Great. So talking a little bit about capital and debt, we have our operating budget, we have our capital budget. How are we in Concord distinguishing between one-time costs from ongoing commitments?
So it all depends on the overall cost of a project or commitment. We do what we can to amortize and spread out the costs over several years if we can within the budget. But any larger one-time costs we highlight in the Tier 1 capital plan to approve at town meeting. So we have the goal of transparent government, so the taxpayers know exactly what we anticipate spending their money on when it comes to large ticket items.
Okay, switching gears to debt. What should residents understand about our debt?
When town meeting approves Tier 2 and Tier 3 spending, those projects are generally authorizations to borrow money. As the funds are needed to complete the project, we bond the funds. Essentially, we take out a loan. We then have to pay that bond back, including interest. Last year, town meeting approved $27.5 million for a 5-year roads program. Residents will see the action of that this spring as we begin to get the paving started. But we also need to see the cost of that hitting the budget as we take out that bond next month for the 27 budget. We have 2 pieces of good news. There's more debt expiring this year than we're adding to the books. So our total debt costs are going down for 27.
That's great.
And there's no request to borrow funds on this year's town meeting. So we won't be adding anything new and unauthorized already. The next bond sold in 27 will be for already authorized projects only. So that includes the year 2 of the roads program and anything else that was authorized at town meeting prior.
Okay, great. So regarding these articles, I think it's 10 and 11, what decisions are voters making at town meeting?
So for Article 10, the budget for 27 is a level service budget. We've included funds for staffing and services that meet the current level of service that Concord receives. Approval of any amount less than what is presented will affect that level service. The town manager and myself and the finance team have spent hours refining the budget to provide the best service for the least cost contractually possible. Article 11 is the capital improvement plan with those one-time costs, and those are being funded with funds already in hand and as usual in Tier 1 as part of our taxes.
Okay, and so now's a good chance to kind of set the record straight. Are there any common misconceptions about the town budget that you want to clarify, Kerry?
So I would say one common misconception might be that the town budget is put together by one office or one person. In reality, it's a very collaborative process over a long period of time, but it involves department leaders, the finance team, the town manager's office, the finance committee, and select board. Another misconception might be that most of the budget is discretionary. In reality, a significant portion reflects contractual obligations, benefits, and other structural costs that can't be easily changed in the short term.
And so if folks want to learn more after this conversation, they can, of course, watch the public hearing where there was more discussion. There were a number of other community meetings to hear about the budget process this year. But there's also the budget book. So do you want to talk a little bit about where people can find it and how they can use that document?
Yeah, so on the town's website, we have our interactive budget book that explains the numbers and the major drivers behind them. And Jennifer, several meetings back, was able to demonstrate some of our very limited AI capability within the budget book. So I would hope that if anybody is interested in learning more, they might take some time to look at that budget book. There's a lot of good information there. And Megan, as you mentioned, the Finance Committee meetings and public hearings are also recorded and available online. And then, of course, if anybody has specific questions, they're always welcome to reach out to the finance office or to the town manager's office directly.
The AI component of the budget book is really kind of pops up a chat box on the side of it. And I can say I've used it internally. As we've talked about today, we put in our requests many months ago. So sometimes if you're trying to double check something or look back and you just put in a prompt, it will pull you exactly to the right information. So it's a really neat tool if people are interested in looking into that. So in closing, I'd be curious to hear, what does this budget say about Concord's priorities?
So at the end of the day, the budget reflects the community's priorities. For Concord, those priorities include maintaining a high standard of public service, managing resources responsibly, and planning for the future. The Select Board establishes broad policy goals each year, and the budget is one way those priorities are put into action.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for helping explain these two articles and some of the budget process. And we hope to see everyone at town meeting. Thank you.